The only thing we did when we elected Trump was we changed lanes. We're still on the same highway because so many people express such faith in President Trump's readiness to chart a fundamentally new course. That's all gone under.
So recently, Colonel Macgregor was on Daniel Davis's podcast talking about how the Trump foreign policy program is essentially the same as the Biden foreign policy program. It's the Washington status quo, and what that means for Americans, why that's the case, that there's so much continuity in America's foreign policy regardless of presidential occupant, and what Americans can do about that. So let's check out what he has to say about it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The second thing is, if you ultimately threaten people long enough, they'll abandon you, and that's happening. We now have SIPRs, which is the alternative to the SWIFT system. We're watching countries do business with each other in their own currencies, whether it's Japan and China, or Saudi Arabia and China, or Iran and China. It doesn't matter. They're doing business in their own currencies. In other words, people are getting away from the dollar. We are being isolated. The original carrier of the plague. Put us in a room. And then you have President Trump, who decides, I'm going to bomb these sites in Iran, and joins the war as a co-belligerent. You have our allies in Tokyo and Seoul watching this and saying, this man's lost his mind. There's no reason for this. What are we doing this for? And this unconditional obedience to whatever comes out of Israel. All of this is doing enormous damage to the American people in the United States. And I think it's hurting Europe because we're dragging them down with us. At some point, this is going to change because I predict the governments in Europe will change. But remember that America is also the microwave nation. You know this, Dan. Well, when's this going to happen? Well, next week. And I will look at people and I say, well, it's developing. These things are coming together, but it's not going to happen overnight. BRICS did not happen overnight.
Yeah, he makes some good points here. I think the biggest and best one is the fault of empire building, how that's always a bad idea no matter the theater, not only because of the lives lost, the treasury expended on it, but how much faith is lost in the process even by our allies. And if you want to negotiate peace with Russia, which I don't think the Trump administration is earnestly willing to do right now, continuing to shovel money into the coffers of Zelensky right now and give him more weapons and more intelligence. If you want Russia to think that the U.S. is for real in that objective, you have to actually make some sacrifices. And if you're going to do what you did in Iran by shelving your own interests for the sake of Israel's, and bomb Iran for the sake of Netanyahu, then what makes that power, Russia, think that they can trust us either? So you just do so much duplicity in Washington. It's catastrophic for the world reputation of the U.S. and what's left of it anyway.
It began over time, but we've accelerated the process. They've now built institutions much more rapidly than we thought possible. The point is that Americans say if you do something on day one, then on day two it should happen. It's not that way. The world does not operate like a microwave, but we're headed in very dangerous and bad directions unnecessarily. Because remember something else, we're harming people and nations who are our creditors. Think about that. Why would you take action against Japan, in particular, who's our largest creditor outside of the United States? What is the purpose of that? What if these people decide, and I think they're getting close to it, to simply offload our treasuries in a giant fire sale?
Well, that's the biggest threat, and the potential for BRICS to come up with a new currency that becomes the world reserve currency, whereas right now the dollar is, that's a huge threat to the U.S. economy. And hey, it actually looks like it's potential now. I mean, I wouldn't say that that's going to happen in the next few years, but BRICS is set up in a way that could conceivably happen in the years to come. And, it seems like the U.S. has done everything it can to push both Russia and Iran closer into relations with the BRICS alliance. India is part of that too, although India is a state that still maintains pretty good relations with the United States, but they're virtually one of the only ones in the BRICS alliance. So we're going to be watching this develop, and it's not going to be a pretty sight once the world ditches the dollar as the world reserve currency. And I have little faith in the dollar anyway. It's a total inflationary boondoggle caused by the central bank, the Federal Reserve, and its inflationary mechanisms that's caused it to lose immense value, especially in the last few years, but especially since the 1970s and the end of the Bretton Woods system, where you can't exactly exchange it for gold anymore either.
Well, they're not going to be the Lone Rangers when that happens. Countries just say, we've had it. We're not dealing with these people anymore. We depend on foreign investment. That's how our system works. People show up, they buy our bonds, we take the money. The money helps us sustain ourselves, our economy. And this is a cycle that has been going on for decades. When the foreign investment stops, what do? Well, we've been buying our own bonds. That's called toxic debt that sits on your desk at the Fed, but it has no value. You're buying up your own stuff to conceal the disaster that's underway. That's why you've got to look at all of these factors. But anyone who's a competent economist, and there are lots of them that people can go listen to, they're warning us that this is not going to end well.
Yeah, the big abominable bill, goes in that same direction too, which will add about $5 trillion in new debt. And then you have Trump out there just blasting Massey and Rand Paul on this, guys that actually point this out. But then you have Republicans that are whipped to support this no matter what, and whipped to support the Biden spending CR, which funds stuff like USAID that you dismantled. It doesn't make sense. This is why Michael Malice always says that conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit. It truly is. And sometimes I'm not even convinced that the Democrats would spend more in the hypothetical situation that Harris won, actually, because every new president just outspends the last. That's been the same trajectory for, I think, every president since Reagan, I'm pretty sure, maybe even before that. But yeah, that's where we're at. Republicans don't really care about spending. That's just a vehicle to get elected. Once they get in office, they completely abandon that for the Trumpian MAGA America First dream of spending more and more and more, just oriented toward the conservative direction, I guess.
And it will come to a climax at some point. That's why we thought when we voted for President Trump, he would say, number one, I have to shed these overseas commitments, got to end these conflicts. I got to bring most of the forces home because I have to cut spending. I have to show our creditors that we're serious about reducing spending. I mean, that's effectively what he said. And what have we got now?
We got a schism with Musk over spending. We got Doge turning out to be a complete fiasco, originally projecting $2 trillion in cuts, and then I think Congress actually did pass $9 billion total in cuts. It's just an absurdity of just mammoth proportions that was sold as it was. And, if I'm to side with one of those two, it's Musk. Musk actually seemed serious about cutting spending, but he didn't have many listeners on Capitol Hill, that's for sure. And that was clearly at the crux of his rift with Trump, clearly. But, we're talking about spending. It's a bipartisan thing. The party is stupid and evil collaborate to do particularly stupid and evil spending schemes. That's just what we have.
We've got more of the same. So people are now saying, well, write them off. These people are crazy. They've lost their minds. They're going to go over the cliff. We are going to go over the cliff.
And what you mentioned a minute ago about a lot in Europe, people-wise anyway, are starting to get uncomfortable with the way the elites are doing it with the France, Germany, UK, etc. They have been dominating stuff. But then this is kind of maybe like a canary in the coal mine with Robert Fico talking about how he's getting damn tired of a lot of this because I don't know if it's passed since I haven't seen since we came on the air, but Europe was just about to pass its 18th round of sanctions against Russia. But Slovakia, among others, are saying, hey, this is bad for us. I don't want to get into this. Here's how he put it.
We will never vote for this madness of the Commission. The phone calls of the hardliners are coming to an end. There is a written proposal of the Commission's guarantees on the table, which the Commission offers us for voting on the 18th sanction package. I have already said that this dispute cannot be won 100-0.
This time it'll be different, guys. 18th sanction package, that is the magic number. Russia's going to capitulate, give up all the Donbass now, right? Right, guys?
But we cannot even lose it 100-0. Those who want to live with the wolves must live with them. This is unfortunately the cruel reality of the current union. Therefore, we must fight to the last moment for an acceptable compromise. Right now, I am sending a proposal of the Commission's guarantees to all relevant political parties, and I expect a statement from them. I believe that the answers of the presidents of the opposing parties will not harm Slovakia at all costs. It is necessary to realize that the suspension of the flow of Russian gas will take place after 1.1/2028, i.e. after the parliamentary elections, and it may be the current opposition, which will gain power and which will have to wipe the tears of the abandoned workers or run away from their anger.
That last phrase is what really got me, because or run away from their anger. He seems to be warning that if we keep going down this path here, which is the elites running everything at the pointing at confrontation with Russia, that at some point even the local populations may rise up. How do you see it?
Eventually, yes, but it's back to what we discussed earlier. They have to be touched by the destruction. In other words, their lives have to be severely harmed in a way that's unambiguous. Until that happens, most of the Europeans will sort of march like sheep in the direction their leaders tell them to go, provided it doesn't hurt them. As soon as there's some real pain, all of that will change. I don't think that's really surprising. It's in the nature of most modern societies that they behave that way.
Yeah, I agree. And for all the pledges that the EU forces are making, the van der Leyens and the Starmers and Merses are making, the Macrons, about this whole thing, you know, they bankrolled this war to some extent. But if the U.S. is gone, they are gone too. Like, I just don't see how they're going to continue to bankroll this war and double down, triple down, quadruple down, sextuple down the amount of money that they have to send there because the U.S. backs out. And I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I have no indication that Trump's going to do that anytime soon, by the way. But if that happens, it truly would force the hands of the European powers in a way we've never seen. I think it almost guarantees a peace agreement if the U.S. just disengages from that theater. But Trump's not willing to do that. And you have all this talk about sanctions and the sanctions regime and secondary tariffs. And what those are, if you don't know, is it's imposing tariffs on countries that trade with Russia rather than Russia directly. You know, this has been done to the brim in Russia. Even before Trump entered office, Russia was saddled with immense sanctions from the United States. It hasn't changed anything on the battlefield, and it won't. And no one's willing to devote forces on the ground, thankfully, in Ukraine. That could kick off a nuclear war, hot nuclear war with the NATO treaty, Article 5 being invoked anyways. But short of that, I just don't think that there's any way to solve this other than disengagement. You know, our overlords don't like that because it doesn't ensure the steady flow of money to Lockheed Martin, but that's the truth.
Let me finish with something that's very important for most Americans and people in the West to understand. In 1914, Russia's number one trading partner in the world was Germany. And Germany's number one trading partner in the world was Russia. In 1941, Germany's number one trading partner was the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union's number one trading partner was Germany. Now, my point is this. It's self-defeating for the people that live in Europe to behave as they are behaving because of what we are telling them to do. That's the real crux of the matter. And it goes back to the simple truth that we don't live in Europe. We're Americans. We live in the Western Hemisphere. We live in North America.
That's the key thing. This is a European dispute. It has nothing to do with America. The only reason America's there, our government, our criminal government, by the way, is for empire building because NATO serves as the European wing of the American empire, and dumping money into it furthers that cause. But hey, I'm with Pat Buchanan when he said, you can't have a limited government world empire. Bring the troops home. Bring the resources home. Get the hell out of there. That's a nuclear power. What are we doing? Just igniting a new Cold War. There's little different. We're just fighting various proxies within it. In Iran, too, that's a BRICS country. That's another proxy closely aligned with Russia. And it's just spiraling out of control. And it will continue to spiral out of control until peace is made. And that requires disengagement. Russia does not give a crap about the U.S. opening diplomacy channels if that means that the U.S. is going to continue to dump money there. We're a co-belligerent in their eyes. We obviously are. And the U.S. started this thing anyway from waves of NATO expansion and overthrowing the government of Ukraine in 2014. So that's what caused it. That's the catalyst for this madness, and it won't stop until Trump gets serious, if he ever wants to in this. I'm not convinced of that anymore.
And the Europeans have got to come to terms with that. They've never really understood that. De Gaulle was the exception. And he said that from the very beginning. And he pointed out that Britain was not really part of Europe. It was an island. And again, British interests on that island were never connected absolutely with what happened on the continent. And he knew that. So there has to be a re-examination of all the things that are going on. But right now, the elites that are in power will not do that. These are the Sorosistas, the products of the globalist movement. They are the ones responsible for the destruction that has already been wrought across Europe. They will, I suspect, be held accountable.
Yeah, hey, I'm all for letting Europe take more of a stake in this conflict. If you want it, get my government out of there. I don't think they're willing to do that. If the U.S. is gone, I think they are too. But if anything, they should be negotiating a peace and not the U.S. And not the U.S. trying to negotiate a peace while it's bankrolling Zelensky. That's for sure. But it's not really our affair. If Trump wanted to be an independent negotiator, he could actually do that if we weren't funding Ukraine. He's not going to be taken seriously if he does, especially if he's using the same rhetoric, which he is, that CNN and Biden use, that, you know, Putin just wants to conquer all of Ukraine. He wants all of Ukraine. He's going to get it unless we take a stand and we ask for more money and we delegate more money to them. It's just ludicrous.
I don't know what it'll look like. It could look like the Place de la Vendée, the French Revolution in 1789 before we're through. There will be so many people so angry about the misfortune visited on them. I think we're going to face something similar here at some point when people finally say that's enough, no more. And the disappointment here is particularly acute because so many people express such faith in President Trump's readiness to chart a fundamentally new course. That's all gone under.
Yeah, I hate to say I agree with the Colonel there, but well said. Great points here. What I want to go back to is the original statement that he made, that essentially the Trump presidency is Washington's status quo foreign policy. And I just have to agree. Let's just go down the list of the different theaters that the U.S. is primarily involved in war right now. So number one, you got Yemen. That's a war that Trump escalated, and he used one of his sole presidential vetoes in his first term to continue. There was a bill on his desk that would have ended U.S. involvement there. It was a starvation blockade on behalf of the Saudis, and that's killed about 500,000 people, by the way, at this point. Well, not only has that not changed, Trump bombed it for a month straight, depleted a lot of U.S. missiles, apparently for no reason. I mean, they fought off the Saudis for about a decade. What makes you think, like, targeted bombings was going to do anything at that point? So status quo. What about Syria? Well, Trump escalated the war in Syria in his first term, put boots on the ground. That regime's been overthrown. I mean, Operation Timber Sycamore began before Trump. The USA dumped $15 billion to remove Assad. You had the whole propaganda campaign. He gassed his own people. All that nutty stuff. And you had the U.S. supporting ISIS against the Sunni regime, fighting on the same side as Iran for a time, by the way, for years and years. We still have a few thousand troops there in the northeastern part of Syria. And right now, the new regime, headed by Jilani, the Sunni ex-Al-Qaeda individual that Trump said has a strong past, he's persecuting Christians right now. So status quo. Ukraine, Trump said he'd solve it within 24 hours. He said he'd end the war. What has he done? Other than open up diplomatic channels with Russia, which, who could dislike that? He's continued to engage in the same status quo policy as Biden, continuing to arm Ukraine, fund Ukraine, give them military intelligence, basically turned down no request from Zelensky. He froze funding for 6 days after that kerfuffle in the White House, but he restored it pretty darn quick. And when Hegseth floated on ending some munitions to Ukraine 2 weeks ago, he just went right back at it and said, no, I'm overriding that with more aid. We're going to have to fund Ukraine. And when he said that, you could see that villain, John Ratcliffe, in the corner just smiling maniacally. And you know the Mark Levins and Ben Shapiro's and Lindsey Graham's of the world all broke out in celebration and adulation in that moment. So yeah, status quo in Ukraine. Israel. You know, no one really entertained the notion that Trump would be, bet good on Israel in terms of a non-interventionist standpoint. He often boasts about how close he is with Israel. But he's been even worse than Biden in some regards. He organized a ceasefire walking into the Oval Office. Just think about this. Let this sink in for a second. And then he greenlit Netanyahu to violate that ceasefire that he orchestrated. Like it was just no problem. Continuing to bankroll the genocide in Gaza, shelving U.S. foreign policy aims to normalize relations with Iran for the sake of bombing Iran. Just on behalf of Netanyahu, no problem. There's not going to be an inspections regime now. IAEA inspectors are gone, and they have now unlimited incentive to create a nuclear weapon, whereas they didn't have one before. If I'm an Iranian and I'm close to the Ayatollah, I'm like, hey, dude, look at what is happening in North Korea. They're not exactly threatening North Korea, the big bullies on the block, Israel and the United States, because they have nukes. And look at what they did to Gaddafi. So yeah, Israel status quo, if not worse. So that's where we're at. Trump retains the same status quo foreign policy, and the reason why is no matter the theatrics, no matter this grand idea of a clash of ideologies, and these big elections that mean everything, that are so momentous. There's the same military-industrial complex. There's the same Israel lobby involved. These lobbies in play, in concert with the banks, push the U.S. in the same direction. It's systematic. It's not based on a tribe or a politician or the left-right dichotomy. It's just not. It's the same foreign policy. You're seeing it from Trump now. But I do want to hear what you guys have to say about it. Let me know down below. Do you think that this is status quo Washington foreign policy under Trump? Is there any true difference? Let me know in the comments below. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Daniel Davis too. Great show he has here. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel and get access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.